This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. I want to talk about my rather traumatic moment or moments that have taken place on Facebook in the last 24 hours. I've attempted to start some discussions or add to some discussions more so than I normally do, and the pushback has been interesting. And the pushback has been on a couple different issues. Somebody posted a equity curve of Bill Dunn against the S&P. And like clockwork, the people come out. It's like the cockroaches crawling out from the walls. Well, look at those drawdowns. I can't take those drawdowns. They never talk about the S&P being down 50% twice in the last 13 years. They never talk about the NASDAQ going down 77%. They never talk about the Nikkei going down 77%. It's always just trend followers have drawdowns. Trend followers have drawdowns. It's like a broken record. And then they come out, they've got these, some of these people don't even have real names, so I don't know who they are. There's somebody trying to push an agenda, whatever. Then they come out and they say, well, the real technique today is to mix up styles of trading, and you want to have mean reverting and trend following and this and that. And it's all a bunch of shit. Come on. It's all a bunch of shit. It's a surefire sign that if someone starts telling you that, they are either trying to push an agenda or they have no clue what they're talking about. Trend following is the meat and potatoes. So when you hear this term commodity trading advisor or CTA, or you hear the term managed futures, and they use these generic terms, which are regulatory terms and name brand marketing terms, hey, guess what? Trend following makes up the vast majority of the assets under those labels. So for everybody out there that wants to use the term CTA or managed futures or whatever term you want to use, and you don't want to talk about the style, which is trend following, which makes it the vast majority of the success and the assets for the last 30 years, hey, keep going at it, man. Keep going at it. I need someone to fight against. I need the push. It's fun for me. It's fun for me. It's fun for me to point out the nonsense. And usually, like I said, these people are often anonymous and not real people, or they don't know what they're talking about. Or they don't want to look at the data. That's probably the biggest thing. Forget Mike Covel's opinion. Look at the freaking data. Look at the data. Look at the data. I should always put that reminder out there, right? Don't just trust me. I might be stone cold crazy. I might not have a clue. I might just be making this all up, right? Everything's just completely made up. Hundreds, I shouldn't say hundreds, but 100 plus years of trend following success. It's all just made up. Go look at that AQR report on trend following success. Go look at that again. The other issue that I raised started with my last podcast, and I was talking about advising someone in their 20s about staying out of real estate. And someone wrote me an email on Facebook, and they said, well, I'm in my 20s. Explain this to me a little bit further. So if you go onto my Facebook, you can see this whole debate. Actually, I think it's a public thread. And of course, the advice was for 20-somethings, and a bunch of 40 and 50-somethings came in and start immediately with, well, if you buy the house for the long term and you hold on and you're going to stay there for 15 years, blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry. Come on, folks. We are in the middle of another zero interest rate policy bubble. And if you don't yet believe in bubbles, or if you've forgotten that bubbles existed, or if you've forgotten what the idea of a black swan is, I can't help you. I really don't want to help you. But if you're going to debate me on this issue, all I ask is, come onto my forum and don't just give me your emotional mumbo jumbo. Give me something I can stick a fork in. Give me some data. I mean, if someone tells me, for example, well, I think most of the real estate problems are people just living beyond their means. And if people just live within their means, they'll be fine and they can get a mortgage and they'll have income at their steady job and they can live happily ever after with inside their 15 or 30-year mortgage. Okay, now if I respond with the, hey, 75% of all homes in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is not chopped liver, are underwater, does that mean that 75% of the people were living beyond their means? Or is it more likely that there was a massive bubble and a black swan hit? The same thing applies to much of the Southwest. It applies to Orlando. It applies to other parts of Florida. It applies to Arizona. So all these areas that are underwater, were all these people just simpletons, dummies? They were bad people? Or did they get caught up in the greed and the fear of a bubble and a black swan hit in this momentous popping of a bubble like we've never seen before? Is that a possibility? At least debate the possibilities to me. Don't just walk into a forum with me and refuse to put your cards on the table. Well, I just have a feeling. Just trust my feeling. Respect my opinion. I just have an opinion. I just want to feel this. Well, that's a good point, Mike, but I still feel this way. Look, we were trying to give advice to 20-somethings about real estate. Just be honest about it. Just be honest about it. If one is in the middle of a high riding time and zero interest rate policy is benefiting you, I shake your hand and I say go for it. But don't tell someone in their 20s that might not know about zero interest rate policy, that might not know about how bubbles are created, that might not know that the Fed regularly creates boom bust periods. Don't tell someone in their 20s that doesn't know about that the same la-la stuff that's been told for the last 50 years, when clearly the idea that you buy real estate and it will always appreciate is gone toast. It's just not true anymore. Let's just be honest about it. That's all I ask. Let's just have a data debate. Let's put all the data on the table. Let's talk about black swans. Let's talk about zero interest rate policy. Let's talk about it all. Let's don't just talk about people buying and living in a house because they're in a certain area where there's steady jobs. I mean, that's almost nonsensical. The idea of a steady job, and don't get me off on a tangent, because the idea of a steady job to someone in their 20s right now is insanity, and they know it's insanity. So trying to tell someone in their 20s that there might be a steady job for them, and then the word job is a 4-letter word. I don't want anybody to have a job. I want everybody to be a creative artist. Yeah, okay. I'm not being a hippie either. When I say creative artist, I mean create something, a business, a painting, a book. I don't care. Just create something. You're going to have a heck of a lot more fun in your life if you create something versus sitting there in an office cube, sharpening pencils and shuffling paper. Now, maybe they'll pay you a lot of money to sharpen pencils and shuffle paper, but one day you're going to wake up and you're going to look at your belly. It's going to kind of look gross hanging over your belt. You probably have to stop really taking care of yourself. And you're going to say, wow, I got all kinds of, quote, success sitting in the office cube. Boy, I got the gold watch and I got all the benefits that come with being in cube living. I've got kind of a pasty button-down shirt on right now and polyester pants, and I'm feeling good. If you're in your 20s, please God, you really don't want that, do you? And I don't use the term God as any kind of religious aspect there. I just throws it out of my mouth, whatever. So, where do I want to go today? It wasn't really there. I just wanted to kind of bring that up at the beginning. Where I want to go today is nurture versus nature. Since I am working on a massive website redesign on one of my sites to really get at this issue of nurture versus nature. And of course, the turtle story is timeless. For those that are not familiar with the turtle story, please see my book, The Complete Turtle Trader, from HarperCollins. It is an eye-opener if you've not seen it. It is timeless. Anybody that tells you the turtle story is not timeless is either a fool, ignorant, or purposefully trying to mislead you. It is timeless. Also, while you're at it, go listen to the podcast that I recently did with Jerry Parker, who is the most successful turtle. Worth listening. Jerry's a very straightforward guy and lots of good wisdom. So the nurture versus nature thing came up with me because for those that are familiar with the Turtle story, it was about Richard Dennis, a very famous trader in the early 1980s. Basically, him and his partner go to see the old Trading Places movie with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, and they walk out and they say, well, Rich Dennis said, hey, I can do that. I can train people. I can take them off the street. I can train them. I can teach them. So right then and there, Rich Dennis was throwing it out that the idea of nurture and not inborn talent was mission critical. So I have two excerpts that I want to play today. They're nearly a half hour long in total. The second one that I will play is something that has probably been on my podcast before. It's about an 8-minute clip from ABC News called The Genius Factory. And it specifically talks about how many of the best pop singers today have been trained and they're literally not born with it. The first excerpt I want to play, though, and I'm going to cut in and out of this probably with some comments because I think these guys from NPR, it is from NPR, and it's specifically about the Trading Places movie, which, of course, is the reason I'm bringing it up with my Turtle World. But I'm going to cut in and out because I think these guys from NPR say some stuff. Well, it's educational, but I think they say some stuff. It's not exactly good, so I might have to cut in occasionally and offer some critique. Let this play.
Back in the 1980s, Louis Winthorpe III was a big deal in the world of futures trading. He worked at a fancy firm in Philadelphia, and this guy knew commodities.
Pork bellies. I have a hunch something very exciting is going to happen in the pork belly market this morning.
Louis was the best. He was about to get married, and the future looked bright.
We are going to make a great couple. We're going to have a great life.
Until his bosses, Randolph and Mortimer Duke, took all of that away from him.
And so begins the great parable about what happens when the rich become poor, the poor become rich, and a con man inherits the earth.
Let me just stop for a second. That really, from my perspective, draw a bigger conclusion about the film, but that's a really simpleton version because it almost sounds like class warfare. Let him continue.
The movie is Trading Places. Hello and welcome to Planet Money. I'm Robert Smith.
And I'm Roman Mars.
Looking good, Roman.
Feeling good, Robert.
Roman Mars is the host of the podcast 99% Invisible. It's about all things design and architecture. And he's on Planet Money today because he had an actual question for us about this movie.
Well, I love this movie. I saw it when I was way, way too young. I was probably 9 or 10. And I just wanted to know, is this the most sophisticated depiction of the inner workings of a financial market in the history of cinema?
That is the perfect question for us, Roman Mars, because we have the ability, and we shall, bring in an entire panel of experts in the commodities and futures trading world to fact-check this movie. Today, on Planet Money, what the movie Trading Places can teach you about financial markets. And I know this is of particular interest to you, Roman. We are finally going to explain one of the great enduring mysteries. What the hell actually happened at the end of this crazy movie?
Oh, I definitely need that. So if it's been a while since you've seen Trading Places, everything is going really well for Louis Winthorpe until his bosses, they have an argument about nature versus nurture, and the evil Randolph Duke bets his maybe even slightly more evil brother, Mortimer Duke, that he can take away Louis's job and his fiancée and his home and his friends, and they can turn him into a criminal.
While at the same time, the Duke brothers take a con man from the street named Billy Ray Valentine. He's played by Eddie Murphy. And they give him Louis's entire life, his job, his home, his butler, and they try to turn him into a hotshot commodities broker. It's kind of a modern-day twist on Prince and the Pauper.
Eventually, the two guinea pigs, they find each other. And Louis and Billy Ray conspire to get back at the Dukes, and they make a brilliant plan to make themselves really rich and put the Duke brothers in the poorhouse at the same time.
It is a crazy, complicated plan that involves futures trading on commodities and cornering the market and frozen concentrated orange juice.
Right there. That's my first question. Frozen concentrated orange juice is central to the movie. And when I first saw it, I totally thought that was made up as a commodity just to be funny. In the real world, my thinking was, you would just trade oranges.
Sure, yeah.
Who would spend their lives trading little cans of frozen concentrated orange juice?
I found somebody. This guy.
My name is Tom Peronis, and I'm a commodity trader. I'm just coming back from the floor of the New York Mercantile Exchange, where I, spent the last 4 hours buying and selling orange juice options and futures.
It's real!
It's totally real. This guy does it all day long. So, Tom Peronis, he's going to be our first expert on all things frozen and all things orange. And we'll meet our second expert in just a moment. But we're going to use both of them to fact check this premise that you had, Roman, that trading places basically could be a university-level course in finance and commodities. And as someone who explains economics for a living, I mean, this is my job. I take my hat off to the writers of this movie. Just listen to this scene. The Duke brothers in this scene lead Eddie Murphy, Billy Ray Valentine, to a table. And set on that table is a beautiful breakfast.
No thanks, guys. I already had breakfast this morning.
This is not a meal, Valentine. We are here to try to explain to you what it is we do here.
We are commodities brokers, William. Now, what are commodities? Commodities are agricultural products, like coffee that you had for breakfast, wheat, which is used to make bread, pork bellies, which is used to make bacon, which you might find in a bacon and lettuce and tomato sandwich.
At this point, Eddie Murphy just deadpans right into the camera. I suspect that sometimes Planet Money listeners feel the same way when we're explaining this to them.
And then there are other commodities like frozen orange juice and gold. Though, of course, gold doesn't grow on trees like oranges. Clear so far?
Yeah.
And reviewing the movie, they really, really did a good job. I mean, someone on that team knew what they were doing.
This is our second expert, Bob Lassandrello. He's a commodities trader in Chicago. He used to trade cattle futures, like Roman you might find in a roast beef, cheddar, and tomato sandwich.
Of course, if you watch that scene, you might think that these guys trade in physical things, the physical things that you see on the table, the bacon, the wheat, the cans of orange juice. But Tom Peronis says that in the orange juice market, that's not quite right.
Yeah, it's definitely not stored just in little cans. Yeah, they probably have large refrigerator-type units for them.
Wait, what do you mean probably? You buy and sell this stuff. You have no idea what it looks like?
No, and as a matter of fact, if you trade agricultural commodities, most commodity traders go their whole careers without ever seeing the physical product. I mean, I used to trade pork bellies and live hogs, and I would know a pork belly if it dropped on the table here.
Yeah, the reason Tom Peronis wouldn't recognize a pork belly on the table is because people like him who do this in real life are trading contracts on pork bellies, or technically the future promise to deliver a certain amount of pork bellies at a certain time at a certain price.
This, just as a quick interjection, is all accurate so far in the sense that it's exactly what the turtles were taught. They were taught that they could trade all of these markets. They needed no fundamental understanding at all. They did not need to know about the orange juice market or supply and demand. They just simply looked at the price movement. So the reality is it was fun for the turtles or Rich Dennis to perhaps say that they were trading all these different types of markets, but in reality, they really did not care what the names were. It was just about the numbers and could you make money on the numbers movement, and that was it. Let me let the clip continue from NPR.
What it really is it's a wager. It's a bet on whether you think something is going to go up or down in price. And Mortimer and Randolph Duke in the movie, they make money whether it goes up or down.
The good part, William, is that no matter whether our clients make money or lose money, Duke and Duke get the commissions.
Well, what do you think, Valentine?
Well, it sounds to me like you guys are a couple of bookies.
I told you he'd understand.
I know this whole contracts thing may seem theoretical, but the bets are based on an actual contract about an actual real thing. The traders just hold the contract for just a few minutes or a few days, enough time to make a little money.
Okay, I don't know what he's going to say next because I've only listened to parts of this, but you might say, well, why are you excerpting this thing if you've not listened to it all? Because I knew where they were going to go. You know they're going to say something stupid, which is that all traders only do this for a few minutes or a few days, which is obviously not true from a turtle trend-following perspective. Let me let it continue.
But before the contract expires and the actual good has to be delivered, that trader needs to unload the contract, needs to sell it to someone who actually wants the thing underneath the contract, who actually wants the oranges, who wants the bacon, who wants the live cows. Remember, that's what Bob Lassandrello traded in, live cattle futures. He didn't want a cow. He just wanted to make a bet on the future prices of cows. But once Bob did screw up. Did you ever receive an actual cow?
Oh, boy, did I.
Did you really?
Yeah, not a cow, 40 of them. And more than 40.
You made a mistake.
Yes.
You made a mistake and somebody called you on the phone and just said, we have cattle here for you? What, are they on a truck or something?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Or they're in the pen. They're actually off the truck and in the pen is what it is. And so when the guys in the East St. Louis stockyards found out that a futures trader took delivery on some cattle, they generally aren't super helpful about how they don't really give you a hand letting you sell them. They kind of stick you with some extra fees, and you know they don't like us guys. They didn't at the time like us guys sort of meddling in their world.
Now back to the movie. Billy Ray Valentine, who's now called William Valentine by the Dukes, is learning this commodities world. And it turns out he has some talent for it, because it's not just about knowing the facts and the figures of the contracts and the commodities. A lot of it is about knowing psychology.
Tell me just why you think the price of pork bellies is going down, William.
It's Christmas time. Everybody's uptight.
Could we please buy now, Randolph?
Right, but if you want to lose money, go ahead.
What are you trying to say, William?
Okay, pork belly prices have been dropping all morning, which means everybody's sitting in their office and they're waiting for them to hit rock bottom so they can buy cheap and go long. So the people that own the pork belly contracts are going batshit because they're thinking, hey, we're losing all our damn money and Christmas is around the corner and I ain't gonna have no money to buy my son the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, okay? And my wife ain't gonna make love to me because I ain't got no money, right? So they're sitting there and they panicking, they screaming, sell, sell, because they don't want to lose all their money, right? They out there panicking right now. I can feel it. They out there. They're panicking. Look at them.
He's right, Mortimer. My God, look at it.
I wait till you get to about 64, then I'd buy. You'd have cleared out all the suckers by then.
This is not what trend following is. If you just listen to that excerpt and you think that that has something to do with trend following, trying to make those kinds of judgments on where a market might go or how low it might go, and you know, if it goes to this low enough number, I might buy and go long. Not trend following, not trend following, not trend following. Gamblers trade like that. Let this continue.
Of course, Billy Ray Valentine makes them a ton of money, but Bob Lassandrello has this small quibble with this scene. He says people don't really declare a particular price for a commodity. No one ever says it's going to 64. They don't really know exactly. But people make bets on whether things just go up and down.
Is that right? Do people just have hunches that something exciting?
I mean, what would happen is, you know, there are guys who would just, you'd be standing around and you'd start to have a feeling that the market was going to go up or down, and then you would trade accordingly. It's sort of like your brain processing all this information ends up manifesting itself as what's called a feel, and then you buy or you sell accordingly.
That's not trend following either. It's not based on feels. It's science. It's systematic. It's having a set of rules and a set of processes that don't require you to sit around and determine how you feel. That is just not the way great traders make money, period.
So far, according to our experts, the movie Trading Places is nailing it. They have this commodities thing down pat. But then it gets a little Hollywood. Louis Winthrop, our down-and-out rich boy, he teams up with his former butler and a prostitute with a heart of gold. We did not fact-check that one.
You don't even need to.
Yeah.
It's a given.
Exactly. Billy Ray, the con man turned trading savant, figures out, wait a minute, I'm being played.
I don't know where these guys are going to go, but I think I've heard all I needed to hear for this particular podcast. And from my point, you guys can go listen to the rest of it on NPR. They're already starting to bore me, so I can't listen anymore. I have to cut this short. There's like 15 minutes left of whatever they're going to talk about. Maybe they make some great points. Maybe they mention the turtles. And if they do, someone tell me. I'll put it back in the next podcast. Let me know if they make a great nature nurture point. Once again, it's on NPR. It's called the Eddie Murphy Rule. I think it's episode 471. So you can go check that out. But the main reason I wanted to play that was really just for the nature nurture idea, the idea of taking somebody off the street And that's what the Dukes did. They took Eddie Murphy off the street and they gave him access. And look, even if you don't have somebody taking you off the street like the Dukes or Richard Dennis, so what? So what? If you know that that's how it works, and you truly believe that's how it works, then you're all right. Go do it. Go do it. You know, not every time in life do you get a chance for somebody to come around and tell you exactly how it works. Now, so I've given the example of nurture versus nature with the turtle traders who were taught by trend-following trader Richard Dennis. Guess what? Richard Dennis had peers just like him. Bill Dunn, Ed Seykota, John Henry, the firm Milburn Ridgefield, the firm Campbell and Company, started by Keith Campbell. These guys were not turtle traders. They were not trained by Richard Dennis. They were peers of Richard Dennis, and they were learning and practicing trend following trading at a parallel time, different cities than Richard Dennis, doing something very similar. And they did not have the good fortune to be trained. They did not have the good fortune to have a fantastic mentor. They figured it out and they did it. So you see, you really don't have an excuse here. If you want to have an excuse of like, well, that's Richard Dennis and I can't do it because they were all taught by one of the best. What about all the other guys that were peers of Richard Dennis's that taught themselves? What about Richard Dennis? He taught himself. And this ain't Warren Buffett. This is not value-based trading. This is momentum. This is trend following. If the market is going up, you want to be long. If the market is going down, you want to be short, and you want to be making money as the market drops. That's the idea. That's the idea. It's tough because society doesn't, I don't really know if there's any other place besides my world where people actively talk about this style of thinking, this trend-following philosophical foundation. It's just not talked about much. And then, as I said in the beginning of the podcast, often people that talk about it either don't know what they're talking about it, or they bastardize it with some other point, or they just glom on to the term trend following to push whatever they're pushing. Look, I don't use some of these big names, some of these famous legendary names. I don't use their names and some of their performance because I've got some hero worship thing going on. No, they're just great examples to prove the point. The strategy comes first. Trend following strategy. Boom. That starts. That's number one. That's the pole position. And then below that are all these great examples. The proof of people doing it. That was what I saw over a decade ago, and I still see it today, and it's still exciting to me today to put the examples out there. This is not about waking up with some master level IQ, and then that ensures that you're going to be a successful trader. No, no, no. If anything, the EQ is more important. Your emotional intelligence. Read the book by Daniel Goleman. Emotional intelligence. Read the book. If you're one of those people that still, in your 40s or 50s, still talks about your SAT scores, or perhaps you even know your IQ and you talk about your IQ, go read Emotional Intelligence. I probably won't sway you. In fact, I know I won't sway you, because if you're in your 40s and you're still talking about your SATs, you probably need to see Dr. Phil, or at least be on some type of medication to help you, I don't know, help you to become more normal, because you're clearly not normal. I told you at the beginning of this podcast, I want to play one more clip, and this one's much more entertaining than the NPR clip. There were some good points in the NPR clip, but that's why I let it play, because I think it was interesting to let them explain. Because the basics of explaining, here's all these markets we trade, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. They start to wander into the crazy parts in the movie. That's not really useful for me. This last clip I want to play is about 8 minutes long. Fantastic. I think I've put this on the podcast before. I think it's called The Genius Factory or The Intelligence Factory, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but it's great. And it gets at the idea of how you can learn and how people learn and how you can become an expert at learning. And there's a couple books out there. One is called Talent is Overrated. The other is called The Talent Code. Definitely worth reading if you're one of those people that thinks inborn talent is the way it's all done. The clip. Let me play the clip right now.
Some kids just seem to have it, right? You listen to Rudy Eliza sing. She's only 14, and wow, where does this come from? And when you consider that this singing school where she's getting a little extra coaching, it's this faceless place at the end of a shopping mall beyond the edge of Dallas. And it seems pretty clear, this is innate talent, the key to success. Rudy was born with it. Maybe, but maybe not. Question, what does Jessica Simpson have in common with Demi Lovato? And what does Demi Lovato have in common with Ryan Cabrera? And Ryan Cabrera with Ashley Simpson. The answer is this faceless place at the edge of a shopping mall. They all went here.
Keep your tongue down. Ha, ha.
They all got coaching from this same teacher, a former opera singer named Linda Septian. And consider, maybe inborn talent is not the key ingredient. Could it be a good teacher and good old-fashioned hard work?
That talent is practice.
The talent is practice, and practice is talent.
Dan Coyle is a writer who set out to break what he calls the talent code, and in a book by that name, he tries to unravel the mystery of what makes a star, really. His conclusion, supreme talent is not born, it is made.
Because I think right now, talent is sort of the last magical thing. It's magic, right? That's the story we're told in the media, it's the story we're told in the culture. Tiger Woods is magic. Michael Jordan is magic. Mozart was magic. But as we look closer and as we use modern tools to look at what's going on there, we're seeing a different kind of magic.
Coyle studied Linda Septian and her school and identifies it as one of several talent hotbeds that he's found, places that seem to produce the most talented singers, football quarterbacks, classical musicians. What was going on here? Well, let's start off with ingredient number 1, practice. Hours of practice.
Which makes perfect evolutionary sense, really. I mean, we are built to learn. We're a learning machine. When we stress the wires of our brain, the skill circuits of our brain in a certain way, those skill circuits get stronger.
And in order to make a permanent memory, you need to repeat something.
All of which plays out beautifully in rat brains, which is what Dr. Doug Field studies full-time. His work is really the scientific underpinning of Dan Coyle's talent code theory because of this white stuff he studies that the rats and we have in our brains, myelin. It's kind of an insulating material that wraps around the nerve pathways.
Is an area of the brain containing white matter.
Field discovered that this insulation actually grows each time an action is repeated.
White matter continues to develop and myelin continues to form.
So it wraps that wire, gives it more insulation, and the signal moves much more fast and much more accurately.
Faster and more smoothly. So if you repeat the same action a lot of times, if you're, say, Tiger Woods, practicing the same golf stroke over and over, the myelin gets really thick and the brain cells start firing much more in sync, and that makes all the difference.
Imagine walking 2 miles per hour and having someone run by at 200 miles an hour. That's the difference we're talking about that myelin can make.
How important is over and over and over and over? And is it talent in the end, or is it the work?
That's a very good question. Talent plays a very important part in that it makes my job easier. Persistent plays a bigger part.
Put another way, practice makes perfect. But we knew that, right?
You get it. Your placement is good. You're doing really well.
And so becoming a Jessica Simpson, it's just a matter of putting in the hours? Well, no, Coyle thinks it's a lot more than that. Who the teacher is a huge part of it. And that takes us to ingredient number 2, great coaching. As a coach, Linda Septia knows that making something look effortless actually takes breaking it down into a series of little parts. You have to do each part right and in the right order every time.
I can make anyone sing very well.
She's been doing this with Jaden Roberts, 8 years old, for the past 2 years. Linda won't let her get past a verse until she has it down. That's what throwing this ball back and forth is teaching her right now.
It has to be a habit, and it has to be repeated over and over and over. Then they've got to move to it. Then they've got to have a rhythm to it. Then they've got to put words to it.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work that applies not only to music, but to everything else, like sports.
Finish too flat, too fast.
This is Tom Martinez.
That's the problem with most quarterbacks.
He is his own star-making machine. He's turned out quarterbacks like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, among others.
Anybody could say, well, I coached Peyton Manning or I coached Tom Brady, and they're going to make it in spite of whoever coached them. But I think the thing is that when you go to a camp like this, you take the worst kid and you say, give him to me for 15 minutes, and then watch him mechanically.
And that's what you'll see him do. You'll see him repeat himself a million times. Tom Brady in his wallet carries a small piece of paper with about 6 or 7 Martinez-isms on them to remind him exactly what those things are. It's simple, it's repetitive, but it's difficult to do.
And as Coyle observed, the style of a great coach is mild, laid back, intensely watchful.
There's nobody giving inspirational speeches. What there are people giving small, really intense corrections. They're getting people into that zone where they can deeply practice, and they're making small corrections. And that's the path to skill. That's the royal road.
Getting into the zone where you are so focused on those small corrections and small steps, the rest of the world just melts away. It's not just practice. It's ingredient number 3, total concentration. We're in rural New York State, the Meadowmount School. Nothing fancy to look at, but look at who studied here. Yo-Yo Ma, Joshua Bell, Yitzhak Perlman, some of the greatest classical performers in the world today. Learning this way is not easy, breaking things down into small steps. It's being interrupted.
It's much more intensified. You gotta really come in there.
It's having to try the same small section over and over. But the process seems to be making more myelin in the brain.
If you don't feel that kind of frustration, edge, failing and fixing sort of sensation, you're not stressing your skill circuits.
What do you see when you see that look? That Clint Eastwood look in a kid's eye?
They're leaning into the air. They are experiencing a mistake and fixing that mistake. And that finding and fixing is at the core of the process. And that golden second happens right after the air. And that's when you'll see them dial in.
And even more on the bass.
If you really practice something for a long time, you'll find yourself just playing all the notes, just making the sound that you've practiced without having to think about it at all.
But that's what Coyle argues. The brain is really growing the talent. In fact, we all have that kind of wiring.
The things you can build with that wire, the skills you can construct with that wire are amazing. And that's what human resilience is all about. That's what human talent is.
So consider, perhaps your kid could have a shot at the big time with a good coach and the right kind of practice and hours of practice. It's asking a lot, but perhaps it works. I'm John Donvan for Nightline in Washington.
Such a good piece. Timeless. Timeless, timeless, timeless. I hope I didn't sound too much angst today. I really am in a pretty good mood. I get frustrated to watch people debate and argue, though. Frustrated is not the word, but it bores me to debate and argue with people who don't even acknowledge their own blind spots, who refuse to have a 360-degree view of the content at hand. And the reason they do this, let's face it, we know why they do this, right? Because they have the mortgage. They are locked into a piece of real estate. They can't escape. They can't get out of it. So they justify, rationalize it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then try and make their situation palatable to the 20-something. And it's like that great Alan Watts video that I've played. You know, if you teach your kids to do the wrong thing and they teach their kids to do the wrong thing, and it just keeps going on, and it's all retch and no vomit. all retch and no vomit. What a great line, right? I just imagine someone sitting there all drunk, trying to throw up on the street, and they're gagging. Rah, rah, and they're trying to throw up, and nothing's coming out. Nothing's coming out. If anything, just vomit. Get it out. Get it out. I guess is that. I don't know if that's really optimistic or not, talking about vomiting. But that Alan Watts audio, which I did play in the last podcast, I'm not going to play it again, is fantastic. You can go find it. What If Money Was No Object, I believe is what it's called, by Alan Watts, who introduced Eastern philosophies to the West. No longer with us, but what a timeless piece of audio. And if you can find the piece of video that goes with it, it's pretty inspirational.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.